Well, Governor Kevin Stitt has been on the job for 100 days, leading the state of Oklahoma. And on this kind of political milestone, the governor joins us here in the Oklahoman newsroom studio. I'm Ben Felder with the Oklahoman, my colleague Carmen Forman, and the governor sitting here with us. And Governor Stitt, first off, congratulations, 100 days. Not a lot of time, but often kind of seen as this initial milestone to judge your progress. And first question to you, how would you assess your progress so far?
Well, I think we've done a really good job of changing the culture and the tone at the state capitol. So I've really focused on bringing people together. We've done a great job of hiring, bringing the right people on the team. You've got, as a new governor, you have tons of people to hire, not only your cabinet, but agency heads, lots of appointments. We've already made 2 appointments to the OU Board of Regents. So just lots of things to do, and I'm really proud of our team and the hard work that they've done up to this point.
Yeah, like I said, 100 days is not a lot of time, but there are some things that maybe you needed to tackle initially, and including agency reform. Getting the legislature to give you that power to hire agency heads for 5 major state agencies. That was something you talked a lot about on the campaign trail. Did you feel like you had momentum coming off the election win to where this was something you needed to tackle right away?
I did. I told Oklahomans that you have to have accountability in state government. And so for me to be elected governor, but then not give me the authority to run the state agencies, it didn't make sense to me. It's like hiring a football coach and telling that football coach, well, you can't choose your own offensive coordinator, defensive coordinators, or special teams coach. And then if you can't even choose them, but also they report to separate boards or commissions. And I was so excited that the legislature agreed with me, and now I have oversight over the 5 largest agencies. It's something other states figured out a long time ago, but Oklahomans are going to really see us move the needle when we can actually make sure that our dollars get into our rural hospitals, into our healthcare system, into our roads and bridges, into our education system. It's so important about managing state government to be able to, control who's running the agencies, what programs they're rolling out, and that's what I'm excited about.
I am curious, your first 100 days has seemed relatively effortless, and you've been excited. You're always, every time I see you, you have a big smile on your face. What's been sort of the hardest part behind the scenes, or the hardest part that we haven't seen? Where have you struggled?
Well, people ask me that, like what's the most surprising thing about your first 100 days? And I really tell them it's how much fun I'm having. And so it's just, I'm an optimistic person. I think a glass half full type person. And that's kind of translating in. I think, some of the challenges are just, it's when you see, that this is the right way to go, but you still have to convince 149 other folks to get on board with you. And so the change is hard in state government, but we've been able to really move the needle. And I'm bringing people together. Everybody tells me, a new CEO comes in and I want to go visit my employees, for example. And the things that I'm doing have just never been done, like touring different state agencies, touring the Department of Education. When I went and toured that agency, they told me, I was so surprised, that the last governor that was there was 1991. Before that, it was 1974. And so just the small things, sending emails to the state employees, asking for their feedback and their input. They're telling me that they've never received that type of communication from the governor, and so those are just exciting things. But I guess the challenge would be, kind of the pace that things sometimes take.
Do you feel like I've asked you this question before, maybe we'll just keep asking it to you every time we check in, but do you feel like you have changed the office more than it's changed you? Have you had to kind of settle into some political norms that you didn't expect to, or do you feel like you really have been able to change the system as an outsider?
Probably a little bit of both. I certainly think that I've changed the norms. Like I'll run up to the 4th floor and walk into the offices of the House members, the senators. I'm having them over to the governor's mansion for cookouts. The relationships we're building together. If you notice, there hasn't been a lot of fighting between the House and the Senate and the governor's office. And I kind of jokingly tell them all, I said, listen, we all 3 have nuclear bombs. I can push my button anytime you want, and if I push mine, then this House is going to push theirs, the Senate's going to push theirs. And what I'm trying to explain there is, if we try to, go run to the media and do press releases and try to make this House look bad, or this House look bad, or this agency look bad, it's just making all of us look bad. Because, and I jokingly, I say, listen, the people in the private sector, they don't know the difference between the House, the Senate, the governor's office. We're just their elected officials. they expect us to go move the needle and make the right decisions. And sometimes when we get inside the Capitol, we can get so focused on what's good for my office or my department or your house or your chamber that we forget that we're really focused on what's best for that person taking their kids to soccer practice in Enid and Woodward and Guyman and the people in Poto and Idabel. They just want us to move the needle. And so that's what I just keep always reminding people, we are making decisions for all 4 million Oklahomans. And let's not worry about if it's a good for the House or the Senate or the governor's office. If it's good policy, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
I'd be remiss if we didn't ask you. There was a ballot initiative filed on Friday for Medicaid expansion. Can you tell us a little bit where your thoughts are on Medicaid expansion at this point, especially in light of the fact that voters next year may now get to decide on this issue?
Yeah, there's still a ways to go. They have to get about 175,000 signatures, and I am not for Medicaid expansion the way we think of it, because basically you're putting more people on a system. I understand I want to get dollars into our healthcare system, but I think there's better ways to do it than expanding the government's responsibility on who we're taking care of. You got to remember, Oklahomans have to remember that we already take care of the blind, the disabled, the elderly, okay? But so the question is, do we want to really expand that population? We have about 800,000 people on Medicaid. What I've done is I'm actually asking for an audit. I'm auditing the rolls of Medicaid to make sure that we have the abusers off the system. And I'm all ears on looking for other ways to get federal dollars into our system, but I'm so protective of the taxpayers and making sure I'm thinking through 3 years, 5 years from now to see what's that going to cost us if we do expand. I want to look at the states that have expanded. There are waiver opportunities. There's work programs. So I'm telling people, hey, I'm all ears to look at the data, but ultimately I'm very cautious about expanding who we're covering. Now I understand why the hospitals and providers want more money in the system, but I also have to think about the taxpayers out in the system and who's going to pay for it.
Yeah, the Senate right now is kind of looking at a expansion-esque bill or options like that. I don't know how much you've been involved in those conversations, but is that a proposal that's more in line with your thinking, or how would you assess that effort in the Senate?
Well, I know that the health chairs in the Senate are working something. They're going to brief me on it, give me their explanations. They're modeling off Indiana's plan a little bit, which I have the utmost respect for Governor Mitch Daniels, who rolled that out, and then the current governor, Holcomb. And so I want to look at it. I want to see what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and how we can roll that out in Oklahoma. But I know that by expanding and adding more coverage, we've got to also think 2 years from now, 3 years down the road, how it's going to affect our taxpayers and where we're going to get the money to fund that.
And not to say it's going to happen, but real quick, but if an expansion bill, a straight up expansion bill, were to make it to your desk, that's something that you wouldn't sign.
That's correct. If a straight up expansion bill comes to my desk, I'm not going to sign that. But I also know that I've got to tell Oklahomans, here's what the plan is for healthcare, and that's what I'm working on behind the scenes. So I want Oklahomans to know that I'm working to give them, here is what we need to do in healthcare to move the needle. And some of it is personal responsibility. That's why you'll notice that I'm doing the Oklahoma City Memorial Relay, which I hope you guys have your team in place. I'm going to see you on Sunday, Ben.
Yeah, Carmen's going to be out there early.
Carmen, you're out there?
Yes,
yeah.
not running though. I'm not a runner.
You're not running?
No.
Oh man. We've got to get healthier. We've got to make sure I have the right providers. We've got to get more doctors into rural Oklahoma. So I'm working on a comprehensive plan to tell Oklahomans, here's the direction we need to go.
Do you think you would have something to show to voters? Just in theory, hypothetically, they get the 175,000 signatures to put this on the ballot. Do you hope to have something, you and the legislature maybe, to show them, like, we will take care of health care, and you can choose option A, our option, or option B, vote for Medicaid expansion?
I think that's exactly what I need to do. You can't just say, no, don't vote for that. We have to say, here's the better way to do this, and here's my plan to do it, and here's what I've researched across the country and that's working well. And so if you vote for this is going to be good for this one segment of the population, but here's the downside. So as the leader of the state, I'm going to go out to Oklahomans and I'm going to tell them, here's what's really happening. Here's what's going to happen if you vote this way. Here's our plan if we do it this way. So, and it could be a combination of the two. I'm not saying there's a lot of research that we're working on behind the scenes. I know the Senate's working on things. We just had a meeting today about it because we have to, like you said, give Oklahomans the options.
So an expansion bill, if it went, or a state question went for the voters, would you actively discourage Oklahomans from voting in support of it?
Well, it's too early to see exactly what they're going to put on the ballot, but a straight up expansion bill, absolutely. I'm going to tell Oklahomans that's the wrong approach, and but I understand I've got to give them Plan B, or I've got to give them really Plan A. That's Plan B or C. I've got to give them Plan A, and that's what I'm working on.
Yeah.
So I'm not for the expansion the way it sits. We've got to look long term and think about the consequences. And I think I can show you the data on what's happened to some states that have expanded and how much they thought it was going to cost their state X, and it's actually cost Y. So I've got to be out in front telling those stories as well.
Yeah.
Because you got to realize who's pushing it. Who's going to benefit from those expansions, right? Are they really worried about that group of the population, or are they more worried about who's going to be getting that money from the expansion? So I get it, but I'm going to tell Oklahomans exactly the truth and what I'm finding out.
Yeah, in the final minute we have here, I want to ask you about the budget. I mean, that's something the legislature is always in talks of during the session. You presented your budget at the beginning of the session. How are those conversations going between your office and the legislature? And I mean, remind us what's most important for you to see in the budget. I know you've talked about putting more money in the rainy day fund. Legislature said, hey, maybe we're not as keen to put that much money into our savings account, so to speak. I mean, what are some of the sacred cows for you in the budget this year?
Well, it's going well, and I've been very transparent. I actually showed the legislature my budget before the state of the state. I've been showing it to them every week, being very clear on my priorities. Priority number one is making sure that we have a savings. We're so fortunate this year that we have $600 million in extra revenue, okay? We can't spend all that, because I've got to think 1 year down the road and make sure we're thinking that if the budget is flat, we can't overspend this year, okay? It's so important that we put a rainy day aside. I make sure that we're disciplined and we save at least $200 million. And so that's what I'm talking to the legislature about. There are priorities. We're absolutely going to hit the teacher pay raise, which is something that I campaign on. I believe we have to invest in education. So there's a lot of priorities. Department of Corrections, I want to make sure that we give those officers a pay raise. My criminal justice, my digital transformation. We've already got $5 million in the governor's closing fund for commerce and growth. So we've got a lot of priorities. We're in a fortunate situation, but I cannot allow us to spend that whole $600 million and then be in a situation next year where we have to cut core services. So what I'm telling Oklahomans is we have to save $200 million this year. So my 4-year goal is to get us to $2 billion in savings, and that will allow us to weather any downturn in the oil and gas industry. And so that's what I'm just kind of walking the legislature through, and I think they agree with me. Oklahomans agree with me. We need to be fiscally responsible, and we will increase spending this year for state agencies around 6%. But I can't spend this whole $600 million. It wouldn't be fiscally responsible for next year.
Yeah.
How fast do you think you're going to run the marathon on Sunday?
Well, it's the relay.
Oh,
the
that's
relay.
right. I'm
I'm
sorry.
not doing the whole marathon.
That's
so
next
there's
year.
5 people, and it's going to be fun. I'm just hoping to get through it. Actually, it's just good motivation, and it makes me get out and exercise, and that's the cool thing about it. So I just invite all Oklahomans to come out and join in this great celebration. It's going to be great weather, and it's fun to get out with your friends and do a little trash talking about beating them. And of course, I'll be running pretty slow.
Yeah, well, a lot of policy, even a marathon relay training in the works for you in your first 100 days in office. Governor Stitt, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
With the Oklahoman, I'm Ben Felder along with Carmen and Forman, 100 days in for Governor Stitt. Thanks for watching.